The Tisrax ship, a towering vessel of jagged metallic edges and glowing blue veins of energy, drifted into Earth's orbit like a wounded beast. From a distance, it looked almost peaceful, but up close, its scars were evident: pockmarked hulls, sections torn open from battle, and the eerie hum of failing engines struggling to keep it aloft. Inside, the Tisrax survivors huddled together in silence, their once proud civilization reduced to a handful of refugees. Thinera stood in the command center, her sharp features set in grim determination, her eyes locked on the view of Earth below. For centuries, the Tisrax had ruled over vast stretches of the galaxy with an iron fist. Their fleets were a terror to all who encountered them, their warriors unmatched in combat, their technology decades ahead of most other species. But a series of disastrous wars, fueled by pride, aggression, and an insatiable thirst for power, had decimated their empire. And with the galaxy turning its back on them, the Tisrax had been cast into exile. No one wanted them anymore. Now, standing in the ruins of their once glorious race, Thinera had come to a decision. They would not perish without a fight. There was still one place in the galaxy where they could seek refuge, one world that had remained untouched by their past actions, a planet far removed from the politics and power struggles of galactic society. Earth. Their scouts had spoken of humanity, a young species, untainted by the Tisrax's ancient wars. But the humans were not without their own conflicts. Earth had only recently begun to step into the larger galactic arena. Their technology was primitive compared to the Tisrax's, but there was something in their history, their resolve, that gave Thinera hope. The humans were survivors. The decision to approach them had not been made lightly. Thinera knew that the Tisrax, with their reputation and history of violence, would be met with distrust. Some factions would never accept them, and the galaxy's larger powers would see any attempt at peaceful integration as a threat. But they had no choice. The Tisraxes were broken, fractured, and dying. They needed Earth, and perhaps, for the first time in centuries, it was time to put aside the arrogance of their past. "Prepare the message," Thinera ordered, her voice calm but heavy with the weight of their situation. "We must speak to them directly. No more games, no more diplomacy. Let them see us as we are, nothing more, nothing less." The technician at the communication station hesitated, then nodded. The message would be sent. A single transmission broadcasted across Earth's frequencies. One simple sentence: "We seek sanctuary." The message was sent. On Earth, the response was immediate. The message came through loud and clear, but it was not one that humanity had ever expected. It was a desperate plea from a race that had once been feared, asking for a second chance. It was an invitation for humanity to decide. Would they extend a hand to those who had been cast out by the galaxy, or would they turn their back on the Tisrax, as everyone else had? As the Earth's leaders began to debate their response, the world held its breath. What would humanity's answer be? The transmission from the Tisrax had barely settled into Earth's communications networks before it sparked an uproar across the globe. News channels erupted with analysts, experts, and military leaders debating the implications of such an unprecedented request. A species that had once ruled the stars, now desperate for sanctuary. It seemed impossible, too dangerous, too risky. Humanity had barely made its mark on galactic affairs. Could they afford to shelter such a powerful and volatile species? Ambassador Jessica Hayes sat in a secure conference room with Earth's top leaders, her mind racing. A seasoned diplomat with decades of experience, she was tasked with navigating this unprecedented crisis. The Tisrax had sent their message, and now it was up to her to decide whether Earth would be their salvation or their doom. "How do we know this isn't a trap?" General Thomas Kell, the head of Earth's defense forces, was blunt. His skepticism mirrored that of many military officials. The Tisrax have been a scourge across the galaxy. They've wiped out entire species, destroyed planets. Why would they suddenly want peace with us? "I don't believe it's that simple, General," Hayes replied, her voice calm but firm. She was choosing her words carefully. We've seen what happens when an empire collapses. There's nothing left but ruins and survivors. They've lost everything. What else is there for them but survival? But why us? Kel pushed, his brow furrowed. They could go to any other species. Why choose Earth? Are we supposed to believe that they've changed? It's not about whether they've changed, Thomas, Hayes said, leaning forward, her eyes intense. It's about whether we can give them a chance to start over. There's no going back for them. This is their last option. There was a long silence in the room. Earth's leaders were clearly torn, and Hayes could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The Tisracs had the technology to obliterate Earth in an instant if they wished, and no one knew what a desperate species might do when cornered. But on the other hand, they were asking for sanctuary, not war. They had nothing left to offer but a promise. We have to decide quickly, Hayes continued. The longer we wait, the more time the galaxy will have to interfere. I suggest we send a representative to meet them directly. If we are going to risk this, we need to see them face to face. After more heated discussion, it was agreed. Ambassador Hayes would be the one to meet the Tisracs, her experience in delicate negotiations making her the best candidate to handle this volatile situation. Hours later, in Earth's secure orbital station, Hayes found herself standing before the Tisracs ship, an imposing figure in the darkness of space. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. Sinera, the Tisracs leader, had requested this meeting in person. As Hayes stepped into the airlock, she tried to prepare herself for whatever might come next. The door opened and a figure emerged, a tall, slender alien, her body marked with ancient scars, but her eyes clear and piercing. Sinera was everything Hayes had imagined. Regal, powerful, but there was something else in her presence, something fragile, a glimmer of humanity that she hadn't expected. I am Sinera, the Tisracs leader said, her voice smooth, with a touch of something deep and sorrowful. And I stand before you, not as a conqueror, but as one who has nothing left. We seek only a chance. Hayes studied her, the weight of the moment heavy in the silence between them. I know what your people have done, Hayes replied. And I know the danger we face if we fail. But Earth will give you a chance, not because we're naive, but because we know what it's like to rebuild, to survive. Sinera's eyes softened just a little. Then let this be the beginning of something new. As they spoke, neither could have known how deeply this meeting would alter the course of their two civilizations. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. The first days after the meeting with Sinera were tense. Earth's decision to allow the Tisracs to settle on their planet had sent shockwaves across governments, militaries, and news outlets worldwide. While some saw the Tisracs as potential allies, others viewed them as an existential threat. Debates raged in the halls of power, but the decision had been made. Now, humanity had to figure out how to integrate a race of exiles with a violent past into a society that had never known true galactic conflict. Ambassador Hayes had returned to Earth, her role no longer just diplomatic but increasingly symbolic. She was humanity's face to the Tisracs, and in many ways, their mediator between Earth's growing mistrust and the fragile alliance that was still taking shape. Sinera and her people were led to a remote location in the northern reaches of Siberia, a region chosen for its isolation and harsh environment. It wasn't an easy decision for either side. Earth's leaders wanted to keep them away from populous areas, fearing that the presence of a species as formidable as the Tisracs might provoke violence from factions who hadn't yet embraced the deal. But Sinera accepted the arrangement with grace, understanding the politics behind the decision. The Tisracs were placed in a heavily monitored zone, with their movements restricted and closely observed. Earth's military maintained a significant presence, while humanitarian groups and engineers worked alongside the Tisracs to establish the foundations of a new colony. At first, the interactions were awkward, distrustful. The Tisracs had always been rulers, not refugees. They were used to giving orders, not following them. Their people, though devastated by their fall, carried the weight of centuries of history that could not simply be erased. To many humans, they still appeared dangerous, despite their claim of peace. Some T-Shreks, too, struggled with the shift in their identity. The warriors, the soldiers who once commanded entire fleets, now found themselves at the mercy of human authority. But Nera held her people together with quiet determination. She knew that they could not afford to fail. This fragile alliance with Earth was the only chance they had at survival. They had to prove themselves, not just to humanity, but to themselves. Then, the first major challenge arose. A small T-Shreks settlement in Siberia was attacked. It wasn't an invasion. There were no alien ships, no high-tech weapons fired from the sky. It was a more insidious threat. Human terrorists, angry and fearful, who believed that the T-Shreks were a threat to Earth's sovereignty. The attack came under cover of darkness. Explosions ripped through the settlement's perimeter walls, and chaos spread. The humans in the colony were caught off guard, some panicking, others fighting back with makeshift weapons. The T-Shreks responded, but in a way that many humans found disconcerting. They didn't retaliate with overwhelming force as expected, but instead formed a defensive perimeter, creating barriers, tending to the wounded, and evacuating non-combatants to safety. Nera stood at the center of the settlement, her calm voice reaching out to her people through their communication channels. We do not fight because we can. We fight because we must protect those we care for. The T-Shreks responded swiftly, using their advanced technology to neutralize the attackers without inflicting unnecessary harm. The military presence quickly arrived on the scene, containing the situation. But it was the T-Shreks who had saved many lives. In the chaos, their restraint and efficiency had made the difference. The next day, the media descended. Cameras captured images of T-Shreks soldiers, their glowing blue armor stained with dirt and blood, standing side by side with human defenders as they helped rebuild the shattered settlement. Earth had been watching. The message was clear. The T-Shreks were not the monsters many had feared. They had demonstrated not just strength, but compassion and restraint. The terror they once invoked had been replaced with the growing sense that they might indeed be something different now, something worth trusting. Ambassador Hayes stood with Nera at the center of the settlement, watching the rebuilding efforts unfold. They had passed the first test, surviving the attack together. But in the aftermath, both knew that their true challenge was just beginning, proving that peace could be built, not just between their two peoples, but within the hearts of the galaxy itself. Despite the early successes in their integration, the uneasy peace between humanity and the T-Shreks was fragile. Trust was hard-won, and every step forward seemed to be met with a new test. Tensions still simmered beneath the surface, and not all of Earth's leaders were convinced that the T-Shreks had truly abandoned their violent past. Even within the T-Shreks ranks, there were whispers of discontent. Some believed their species should not be relegated to hiding on Earth, but should rise again and reclaim their place in the galaxy. Ambassador Hayes knew the only way to quell the doubts on both sides was to create a visible demonstration of unity. She proposed a joint military exercise, a collaborative training mission designed to show the world that humanity and the T-Shreks could fight together, not against each other. This exercise would serve as both a test and a statement, but most importantly, it would give both species the chance to put aside their fears and work as one. The exercise was set in a remote training ground in the Canadian wilderness, far from any major population centers. It was to be a simulated combat scenario, a mock battle against a common enemy. Human forces would partner with T-Shreks soldiers, blending their distinct military strategies and technologies into one unified force. The exercise would showcase how the two species could work together in the heat of battle. General Kell was the first to express his concerns. "You're asking us to trust them with the lives of our soldiers," he said bluntly to Hayes. "We're talking about the T-Shreks, the same people who decimated entire planets. They might be pacifists today, but we don't know how they'll react when real combat begins. It's too dangerous. I understand your concerns, General, Hayes replied, her voice steady. But if we can't work with them in this controlled setting, we'll never know if we can truly trust them. If we don't try, we'll never move forward. This is the only way. The joint exercise kicked off under a heavy cloud of uncertainty. Earth's military and the Tesseract forces moved into their positions, setting up camp and preparing for the simulation. Human and Tesseract officers were paired together to plan their strategies. It was a strange sight. Human soldiers in their standard-issue gear alongside Tesseract warriors in their sleek, glowing armor, their weapons pulsing with energy. Despite the apparent differences, they had one thing in common: the determination to prove their worth. The first day of the exercise was uneventful. Training simulations ran smoothly, with both sides navigating unfamiliar terrain and adapting their techniques to the different fighting styles. But on the second day, the unexpected happened. A rogue faction of galactic mercenaries, having learned of the exercise, launched a surprise attack on the combined forces of humanity and the Tesseract. The mercenaries, hired by an unknown enemy within the Galactic Council, sought to sabotage the fragile alliance between Earth and the Tesseract by provoking a conflict. They assumed the Tesseract would react violently, giving Earth a reason to sever ties with their new allies. What the mercenaries didn't anticipate, however, was the unified front both species presented. In the chaos of the ambush, human and Tesseract soldiers quickly formed a cohesive defensive line. Synera, alongside Captain Solus, issued orders with precision, coordinating the two forces in a seamless display of tactical brilliance. The Tesseract soldiers were unmatched in their speed and strength, while Earth's troops brought strategic ingenuity and resourcefulness to the table. Together, they neutralized the mercenaries with minimal casualties. General Kell watched in stunned silence as human and Tesseract forces fought side by side. The outcome was clear. The Tesseract had held their ground, but it was the combined strength of both species that had ensured victory. In the aftermath, as the smoke cleared and the last of the mercenaries were rounded up, Hayes met with Synera. They stood together, surveying the battlefield, a landscape now littered with debris, but filled with the remnants of cooperation. "They didn't expect us to fight together," Hayes said, her eyes on the horizon. "But we did." Synera nodded, her voice carrying a quiet pride. "This is only the beginning. The galaxy will see that we are no longer what they think we are." The joint exercise had done more than just show that they could fight together. It had proven that humanity and the Tesseract were capable of more than mere survival. They could stand united. And now, the galaxy had to reckon with this new alliance. The success of the joint military exercise sent ripples throughout Earth and the galaxy. For the first time, humanity and the Tesseract had shown the universe that they could stand together, not as separate species, but as equals. The event was broadcast across all intergalactic news channels, stirring curiosity, hope, and fear in equal measure. Some saw it as a new era of cooperation, while others, especially the Tesseract's old enemies, viewed it as a dangerous turning point. For Synera, the exercise had been a pivotal moment. But the victory wasn't without its costs. Despite their tactical success, the Tesseract were reminded of the horrors they had left behind. Their military might was still in their blood, their warriors' instincts honed for battle. But it was a battle they could never undo. They had to live with the consequences of their actions, and that weighed heavily on Synera's shoulders. Sitting in her quarters on Earth's orbital station, Synera stared out at the blue planet below. Her reflection was distorted on the surface of the glass, a silent reminder of the Tesseract's fractured identity. Once proud conquerors, they had become exiles, shunned by the very universe they had sought to dominate. Now, they were forced to live among the very species they had once considered beneath them. The shame was something she could never escape. "Do you ever wonder if it's enough?" Synera's voice broke the silence. The question wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but Ambassador Hayes, who had been quietly watching her, took it as an invitation. "Enough?" Hayes asked, sitting down across from Cinera. "What do you mean?" "All of it," Cinera said, her voice tinged with a quiet frustration. "The exercise, the peace, the survival. Do you think we'll ever be free of our past? That we can truly change what we were?" Hayes didn't immediately answer. She knew the weight of those words, having heard similar sentiments from human survivors of their own wars. Humanity, too, carried scars, some visible, some buried deep within. But she had seen the capacity for change in both species. She had seen it in herself, in the humans she represented, and now, in the Tusracs. "We can never change what's been done," Hayes said, her voice calm but firm. "But we can decide what happens next. The future isn't written in the past. It's what we make of it. You may never escape your past, Cinera, but neither will anyone else. The key is to use that past to build something better. For your people, for ours, for both." Cinera was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant. The weight of her people's history bore down on her, but Hayes's words had planted a seed of doubt in her mind. Was it really too late for the Tusracs to change? Was there a way forward, one that didn't involve continuing the cycle of violence and conquest? But the scars of the Tusracs ran deep. Despite their recent success, Cinera knew there were factions within their own ranks who believed that peace was an illusion. Some of her people still dreamed of reclaiming their old glory, of re-establishing the Tusracs empire and expanding once more. These rebels, though a minority, were growing restless. They were led by General Zarvok, an influential Tusracs officer who believed that Earth was simply a temporary refuge, a stepping stone to something far greater. Cinera had heard whispers of a faction within her own ranks, quietly rallying support for Zarvok's cause. She had no doubt that their next move would be decisive. That night, as Cinera walked through the Tusracs encampment in the Siberian wilderness, she could feel the shift in the air. There were those who were beginning to question her leadership, who believed that the Tusracs should not bow to Earth, but instead forge their own destiny, even if that meant bloodshed. Cinera had one choice: keep the peace and risk her people's future, or take the offensive and risk everything, again. As she made her way to her command center, a message blinked on her communicator. It was from General Zarvok. "The time has come, Cinera. The Tusracs will rise again. You cannot stop it." Cinera's heart sank. She knew what this meant. The fragile alliance with Earth was in jeopardy. The Tusracs were at a crossroads, and her next decision would define their future, and the future of their relationship with humanity. She took a deep breath, her hands gripping the sides of her chair. Peace was within reach, but so was war. The galaxy would not wait. The days following the warning from General Zarvok were tense and filled with uncertainty. Cinera knew that the fragile peace she had worked so hard to build was in peril. Zarvok's faction was not just a political threat. It was a call to arms, a declaration that the Tusracs would no longer bow to Earth's hospitality. The warning was clear. The time for diplomacy had passed. It was now a matter of survival. Cinera couldn't shake the feeling that her people were caught between two impossible choices. They could fight to restore their empire, as Zarvok believed, and risk everything, including the potential to rebuild their future in peace. Or they could side with Earth, continue the difficult path of integration, and risk losing everything that had defined the Tusracs for millennia. Their strength, their autonomy, their legacy. As the sun dipped below the horizon over Siberia, Cinera summoned a council of her most trusted advisors, the few Tusracs who had stayed loyal to her vision of peace. The small room was heavy with tension, the silence broken only by the hum of the advanced equipment around them. "We cannot ignore Zarvok's threat any longer," Cinera began, her voice steady, but tinged with an underlying anxiety. "He is rallying support, and if we do not act, we risk the entire colony. The alliance with Earth may be the only hope for our survival, but not if we are torn apart from within." The room fell silent, each advisor contemplating the gravity of her words. Then Corin, one of her most seasoned officers, spoke up. "We've known this day would come. The Tisracs have never known peace for long. The call for war is in our blood. Zarvok will not stop until he's toppled you and taken command. He believes in one thing, that the Tisracs are meant to dominate, not coexist." "I don't want to dominate anyone anymore," Sinera replied, her voice hardening. "I want to survive. I want my people to survive. And that means we need Earth's help. But if Zarvok attacks, we will have no choice but to defend ourselves." Corin nodded solemnly. "You are right, Sinera. We've come too far to let one man's ambition destroy what we've worked for. We will stand with you." The meeting ended with a heavy decision. They would not stand idly by while Zarvok threatened their newfound peace, but they had to act carefully. They would not provoke a war with Earth, nor could they afford to lose the support of the very species that had offered them sanctuary. Sinera sent word to Earth's leadership, requesting an urgent meeting. The time had come to reveal the true nature of the threat. Ambassador Hayes, who had spent much of her time working alongside Earth's military to ensure that the peace was upheld, received the message with grim understanding. She had long suspected that the Tisracs had factions that weren't entirely on board with their peaceful integration, but hearing it confirmed still made her stomach tighten. This wasn't just a matter of diplomatic maneuvering anymore. It was a matter of survival. She met with General Kell in a secure facility on Earth's orbital station. The tension in the room was palpable as they discussed the details of the message from Sinera. "If Zarvok's faction rises, we're not just talking about a civil war among the Tisracs," Kell said, pacing. "If they move against Sinera, they will likely try to drag Earth into it, or worse, use Earth's resources and technology to further their ambitions. We need to act before Zarvok does," Hayes said, leaning forward. "Sinera is asking for our help. We cannot allow the Tisracs to tear themselves apart. They may be our allies, but that doesn't mean we can afford to ignore this. We can't go in blind, though," Kell countered. "We need to know where Zarvok's loyalties lie. If he has support from other galactic factions, this could escalate far beyond the Tisracs. I'll contact Sinera again. I need her to trust us. We need to know everything she knows about Zarvok's forces, who's supporting him, and what his next move will be." Back on Earth's surface, Sinera paced restlessly in her command center, awaiting the response from Ambassador Hayes. Time was running out. If Zarvok launched an attack now, it could be devastating, both for the Tisracs and for Earth. Her people had made a home on this world, but some of them still believed that Earth was a mere stepping stone. It was then that a shadow crossed the doorway. Corin stepped inside, his expression grim. "Kinera, we've intercepted a transmission. Zarvok is planning an attack on the Earth's military assets here on the surface. It's not just a show of force. He intends to cripple Earth's defenses." Sinera's heart sank. She had known the danger was coming, but hearing the specifics made it real. "Then we don't have much time. We must act immediately, or everything we've worked for will be destroyed." The peace she had fought so hard to secure was slipping through her fingers. But now she had a choice. Would she face Zarvok head-on with Earth's help, or would she risk everything for the chance of rebuilding a fractured people? The galaxy was watching, and her decision would reverberate far beyond Earth's borders. The storm was coming, and Sinera knew it. Zarvok's faction had made their move, and with Earth's military now in the crosshairs, there was no more room for diplomacy. Sinera had no illusions left. Zarvok would not stop until he had seized control, and every day they delayed, the greater the chance of full-scale war. Ambassador Hayes had responded swiftly, pledging Earth's support in the event of an attack. The two had shared a brief, urgent conversation, and Hayes had given Sinera the go-ahead to take whatever steps necessary to defend their people. Earth's military forces would provide backup, if the Tisracs would stand by them. Sinera stood on the observation deck of the Tisracs command center, watching the icy winds sweep across the Siberian landscape. The Tisracs encampment was on high alert now, their advanced sensor network scouring the skies and monitoring all communication channels. Zarvok's rebels were out there, somewhere, hidden in the shadows, biding their time. But the element of surprise wouldn't be enough to win the battle. The decision was made. Zarvok's rebellion had to be stopped before it could escalate further. Kinera had already sent messages to the loyal factions within her people's ranks. Those who still believed in the vision of peace with Earth had rallied to her side. They were ready to fight. As the sound of approaching T-Strax soldiers filled the room, Corin entered, his face a mask of resolve. He didn't speak at first, but the weight of the situation hung heavy between them. After a long moment, he spoke. Zarvok's forces have mobilized. We've confirmed multiple strikes on Earth's military facilities near the northern bases. They're trying to draw us out. If we engage them here, we risk pushing the T-Strax back into a war they don't want. But if we retreat, Corin's voice faltered slightly, we may lose everything. Tinera clenched her fists, feeling the weight of the choices on her shoulders. They had fought so hard to escape the cycle of destruction that had consumed the T-Strax for millennia. And now, just when they had a chance to forge something new, it seemed as though it was slipping away. Zarvok's vision of dominance was too seductive for many of her people. It was easier to fight, to seek power, than it was to negotiate, to survive through cooperation. I won't run, Cinera said finally, her voice steady. We stand. We fight, but not as we once did. We fight for survival, for our future. And we do it together, with Earth. Corin gave a firm nod, his loyalty unwavering. As you command, Cinera. I'll gather our forces. We strike before Zarvok can reach the capital. The T-Strax soldiers, once known for their ruthless offensives and overwhelming firepower, now had a different mission. They would not strike with the mindless violence of their past. They would be strategic, calculated. The T-Strax would fight, but they would do so with purpose. On Earth's surface, General Kell was already preparing for the worst. The attack had begun, and Earth's northern defenses were under siege. The T-Strax had not yet engaged directly, but it was clear that the rebellion had the potential to spread quickly. Kell was overseeing the deployment of troops when a message came through from Cinera. We're mobilizing. We'll be there soon, she said, her words precise, though her voice carried the weight of a leader on the edge of a precipice. General Kell's response was immediate. We've got your back, Cinera. We'll hold the line. The battle for the northern territories began in the dead of night. The rebels, led by Zarvok, launched their assault on the Earth military bases with full force. They had no hesitation, no mercy. Zarvok was determined to make a statement, but he hadn't anticipated Cinera's speed and determination. As dawn broke over the icy plains, the ground shook with the roar of combat. Trax's forces, those loyal to Cinera, moved swiftly and silently, their advanced cloaking technology allowing them to infiltrate the battlefield unnoticed. With Earth's troops providing support, they struck with precision, cutting through Zarvok's forces like a blade through fabric. Zarvok, however, was no fool. He had anticipated a counterattack and had set up traps, ambushes, and defensive positions to stall the T-Strax forces. But as the two armies clashed, it became clear that Cinera's forces were better coordinated. Earth's technology combined with the T-Strax's military might was a force unlike anything Zarvok had encountered. The battle raged through the morning, each side pushing, pulling, striking. But it was Cinera who stood at the heart of the conflict, directing her forces with calm precision, refusing to let the fear of the past dictate the future. She knew that if they didn't win this battle, their future, her people's future, would be shattered. In the midst of the fight, Zarvok himself appeared on the battlefield, his face twisted with anger and desperation. He charged at Cinera, his forces rallying behind him. The final confrontation between the two leaders was inevitable. Cinera faced Zarvok across the broken landscape, the battlefield stretching out around them. You would destroy everything we've worked for, she said, her voice cold. Zarvok's eyes burned with fury. You've betrayed us all. You've become weak, Sinera. We will never be slaves to Earth. With a sharp movement, the two leaders clashed, and the fate of the T-Srax hung in the balance. The final confrontation between Sinera and Zarvok unfolded amidst the chaos of battle, their weapons flashing in the dim light of the dying day. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the forces around them clashed. But for a moment, the world seemed to pause, the tension between the two leaders cutting through the battlefield. Zarvok's voice was a growl of fury. You've become soft, Sinera. You think you can change the T-Srax. You think you can throw away everything we were for some fragile peace. You've lost sight of who we truly are. Sinera didn't flinch. She had heard this argument countless times before from others, those who longed for the glory days of the T-Srax Empire, who saw their race's past as something to be resurrected. But she had seen what that path led to: death, destruction, and exile. She had learned the hard way that power through conquest was a lie. I haven't forgotten who we were, Zarvok, she said evenly, her voice betraying none of the emotion that gripped her heart. But I've seen where that path leads. The T-Srax have already taken enough from the galaxy. If we don't change, if we don't learn to live differently, we will be no better than the monsters we once were. Zarvok's lips curled into a snarl. You think I'm the monster. You betrayed us all. Sinera, you'll never understand that power is what the T-Sraxes were born to wield. The galaxy won't let us live in peace forever. They'll always fear us, and that is why we must be strong. In a blur of motion, Zarvok lunged, his blade crackling with energy as it cut through the air. Sinera parried, her own weapon humming with an almost tranquil force. She had trained for this moment, not just in physical combat, but in knowing that the fight wasn't just for survival, it was for the soul of the T-Srax. The two leaders clashed again and again, their blades meeting with a force that could shatter steel. Zarvok was relentless, but Sinera's movements were calculated, each strike and parry with a purpose. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for her people's future. The battle raged around them, but Sinera felt a strange calm within, knowing that she had chosen her path. The T-Srax had been cast aside by the galaxy for their past sins, and they could not afford to repeat those same mistakes. They had been given a second chance, by Earth, by their own people, and by the galaxy itself. And she would fight with everything she had to protect that. Finally, with a swift, decisive motion, Sinera disarmed Zarvok. His blade flew from his hands and landed several meters away. She stood over him, her own weapon aimed at his chest. He glared up at her, rage burning in his eyes, but there was something else there too, a hint of disbelief, of realization. You've lost, Sinera said softly. The T-Srax don't have to be rulers of the galaxy. We just have to be survivors. We can build something better. A future where we don't need to conquer to be strong. Zarvok's defiance faltered for a brief moment, but the fire in his eyes flared again. You think the galaxy will ever accept us? He spat. The T-Srax are nothing but a weapon, a tool. We are always destined for war. No, Sinera replied, lowering her weapon but keeping her gaze steady. We are destined to rebuild, but we have to change. I won't let you destroy that chance. Zarvok sneered but made no further move. His rebellion had failed. Around them, the T-Srax loyal to Sinera had subdued Zarvok's forces, and the battle had begun to quiet. The tide had turned, not through sheer force, but through unity, strategy, and the vision of a different future. The dust settled, and Sinera turned toward her people, her heart heavy but resolute. The T-Srax had survived, but the real fight was just beginning. The choice to change had been made, but it would not be easy. The scars of the past would not vanish overnight, and not everyone would accept the path she had chosen. But she would fight for it, because she believed in the possibility of a future where the T-Srax could coexist, not through fear, but through cooperation. Ambassador Hayes and General Kill, who had been monitoring the situation from Earth's command center, reached out to Sinera. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a new beginning. "We're here, Sinera. You did it. The Alliance is stronger than ever." The galaxy was watching. But this time, it wasn't with fear. It was with hope. The Tishraks had been cast out by the galaxy, but in the end, they had found sanctuary with humanity. Together, they would write a new story, one that would reverberate through the stars. And this time, it would be a story of peace.